What I want to talk about on today's call is the state of marketing, the power of focus, Facebook advertising, the best 3 sales questions, video marketing, the importance of faces.
This call is being recorded.
All right. Well, thank you guys for logging on. It's going to be a fun, long week for a lot of us. A lot of the company is traveling to Boston for the big HubSpot event. And we've got some new employees starting in Orlando today that I'll be training before I hit the road. But I wanted to do this call because I think it's critical. And I'm going to get into it here now. But it's just been a lot of fun to learn what you guys want from us as your leaders and managers. So what I want to talk about today on the call is how to be a great leader, how to be a great manager. And as I started writing down the attributes of great managers and leaders, I started getting into this rhythm where a lot of them started with P. You know, things like being passionate and being a pupil. And so I'm going to go through what I believe, based on your feedback as a staff, the 16 Ps that make a great manager are. And I'll go through a little description of each one. And if you're not a manager or a leader at the company yet, these are going to be the things that you need to grow into to become one. If you're never going to be one, that's okay. These are the things you should expect and demand of your manager at Curaytor. And if you're already a manager, the advice should be pretty straightforward. This is what your staff and what the owners want from you as a leader. And so I was tempted to do this call with just the managers. But I think it's so important that we understand across the company, what is the expectation of my boss? What should I expect them to do for me? Where's that line in the sand? And so I'm going to go through these one at a time. And I want you guys to take notes. But the first one is that the best managers and leaders are passionate. They have a deep passion for the work that they do. They wake up every day and they love their job. They don't go to their job. The other thing they have is pride. They have a lot of pride in the work that they do. They have an owner mindset that the work they're doing is being done as well or better as if the owners were doing it themselves. So there's a ton of passion in the best leaders. There's also a ton of pride in the best leaders. The other thing that the best managers and leaders do is they're protective. You've got to be protective of your staff. When a tough situation comes up, when a client gets angry, when a personal issue arises, which is going to happen, you've got to be the mama bear. You've got to be protective of the people that work for you. The other thing you have to be is picky. As a manager or a leader, you have to be the pickiest person on your team. And a lot of times that comes with criticism of the work that's being done. But somebody has to be picky. Somebody has to make sure that every T is crossed and every I is dotted. A great leader and manager is absolutely picky about the work that's being done, but they're also a pupil. Great managers and great leaders are great students. Sometimes I think once we get into leadership and once we get into management, we feel like we need to stop learning and we need to only teach. And that's just wrong. The best managers and the best leaders are the best pupils. They are a student of their game. Because if your axe is not the sharpest, you can't go sharpen your team's axe. So I love when the best managers are students of the game. They're always learning new things to share back with their team. The other thing the best managers and leaders do is they practice what they preach. Guys, you have to practice what you preach to be a great manager or leader. If you're preaching that people work hard, if you're preaching that people get in at a certain time, if you're preaching that people get their work done on time, if you're preaching that you want your team to respond fast to you, you have to practice what you preach. You have to eat your own dog food. So the best managers are actually workers in disguise. They don't just preach, they practice what they preach. The other thing I've noticed is that the best leaders and managers are putting in more hours than their team. If you are a manager or a leader and you're not clocking in first and clocking out last, something is wrong. You know, a lot of times we think in management that once we have people working under us, now we don't have anything left to do. We just have to make sure they're doing their work. And that's just not the case. The best managers and leaders are going in early and staying late and doing it for a long time. The quote about success, I think it's, I believe it was Thomas Jefferson, people don't find success because it's called hard work and it's dressed in overalls. Well, if you're a manager and you get the benefits and perks and pay that comes with that, you got to be putting in more hours than your team. If your team's putting in 40 hours, you got to be at 44. It's just a requirement of being a great leader is that you put in more hours than your staff. The other thing that's critical to management is that your decisions and your communication have to be purposeful. They can't be passive. You have to optimize for clarity, not for niceness. A lot of times we kind of passively watch our team, and then if there's a problem, we step in. And that's just not the way to do it. Your decisions, your instructions, your requests, your demands as a manager have to be purposeful. You can't be passive. You can't assume that your team knows what needs to be done. You have to be very, very purposeful. And on that note, you also have to be proactive. The best leaders and managers anticipate problems. They're not just a pothole fixer, they're a pothole preventer. They know that the road's getting crumbly before it crumbles. And they proactively communicate with their team. They proactively find solutions. They proactively come to the owners and say, we've got an issue here that needs to be fixed. The best managers and leaders are not reactive. Even if you're great when there's a problem, you're not great. Because the great leaders are proactively uncovering the problems, not just patching them up once they happen. The other thing that a great manager has to have is patience. You've got to be patient with your staff. You've got to be patient with the other divisions. You've got to be patient with yourself. You got to be patient with the products and with customer support. And you got to be patient with sales, right? So I believe the best managers are patient because they understand the long-term vision of the company. They understand the North Star that everybody's trying to achieve together. So while a lot of times your staff gets a little bit in the weeds and their head is spinning and they're moving 1,000,000 miles an hour, sometimes, and this was really great feedback from Wendy, sometimes the busier you are, the slower you need to be. Sometimes the faster you move, the less you do things well. So it's about patience, but it's also about pace. As much as I want our management and leadership to be patient and to think long term, you also have to move quick. Like this stuff is happening fast. So you've got to have pace to your work. Managers can't be the tortoise. They've got to be the tortoise and the hare. They've got to be the hare and the tortoise. You've got to be able to go super fast when the company requires it, but then you've got to be able to slow it all the way back down when it's also required. So the best leaders are patient and they have a great pace. The other thing is they're persistent. You think about Jimmy and Holly working in customer service, or think about Jimmy working with the product team. Think about me coaching the sales guys. Like, you have to be persistent. Rome wasn't built in a day. There are times where you've got to follow up and follow up and follow up again. If there's a message that you want to get through your staff's head that you don't want them to forget, it's got to be persistent. You can't just say things one time. You've got to be following up constantly on the things that matter the most. And it's kind of like being a pest, right? Persistent and pest, it almost looks the same. But ultimately, you got to be a little bit of a pest. You've got to be persistent with the things you need done because you've got so many people under you that have things to do that work back to you. The other thing I love about great leaders is they pound the phone. And what I mean by that is not every company's, separated like ours, where some are in Boston, some are in Orlando, and some are, all over the country. But if you are going to be a great leader, you have to talk to your staff more than you type to your staff. You've got to be willing to get on the phone with customers, get on the phone with the owners, and get on the phone with your team to talk through challenges. I definitely think that one-on-one personal meetings where you're talking, not typing, it's almost like going away. Everything's a group meeting. Everything's digital, right? It's like, think about how many times we've been in a group Slack chat, right? Or a group Google Hangout call or something like that. The best managers pound the phone, meaning they talk to their team and they do it one-on-one. You can't just have group meetings in Slack and call yourself a manager or a leader. The other thing is that the best managers understand the balance between inflicting pain and providing pleasure. Like, typically we think of a boss or a manager as somebody that kind of nags us, right? They're always quick to point out when we screw up, but they're never as quick to prop us out when we do well. And I can promise you there's a fine line there. You can beat your team up if you prop your team up. You can be sour if you're going to be sweet too. So guys, it's so natural to nag. It's so natural to nitpick. It's not quite as natural to compliment and to give people props. So it's okay to have some pain and some pleasure as a manager, but you better find the right balance. If you're just nice all the time, that's not a leader. And if you're just a jerk all the time, nobody's going to want to work for you. Yeah, you've got to be as willing to prop out as you are to beat up, right? You got to be willing to put people on a pedestal, but then pull them off the pedestal. But ultimately, positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement works. Like, I think about my Great Dane and going through the training and all the training stuff that you go with dogs. A lot of the training for dogs is actually treats, right? Every time they do what you tell them, you give them a treat. But a lot of the training is actually spraying them in the face with vinegar or shaking a can full of coins and throwing it at them. So there's a balance, and different employees need a different ratio of pain and pleasure. Your job as a manager or leader is to figure that out. Like, I personally don't like compliments, believe it or not. I don't like people to get on the phone with me and tell me how great I am. I actually prefer criticism, because I got plenty of people telling me I'm great. When somebody's willing to speak up about a negative thing that I'm doing, that is actually more impactful. Those are the kind of the reverse compliments that I remember a lot more. So the pain and the pleasure balance between giving your staff credit and then giving your staff crap, that's actually a very real balance that the best leaders find. And then the last one, guys, and I'm going to end with the last P, and I'm also going to end with a quote. The last P is that the best managers put their team on a pedestal. You have got to look at your team and your staff as the only reason you have a job. And I think some of the managers and leaders that do a bad job out there in the world, they think of it the other way around. They think of themselves as the manager on a pedestal, and their staff is below them looking up. And the best managers and leaders actually put their staff on the pedestal, and then they look up at them saying, hey, what can I do to keep you guys up there? What can I do to continue to prop you up? Not how can I climb above you? So if you're a manager or a leader, your goal is to put your team on a pedestal, not to put yourself on a pedestal. And that relates to the quote that I'll end with, which is one of my favorite quotes about leadership. And it's also something that's really relevant because we're all heading to Inbound this week with HubSpot in Boston. This is a quote I'll leave you guys with from Dharmesh, who is the co-founder of HubSpot. And it's one of my favorite quotes on leadership and management. And he said, success is making those who believed in you look brilliant. Thanks for your time, guys.
Hey, this is Chris. Thanks for listening to my call. If you enjoyed the call, please subscribe right now. Also, share the episode and use the hashtag #CallsWithChris. Every week, I choose a few people randomly to win a free signed copy of The Conversion Code, my USA Today best-selling book. You can also visit Curaytor.com. That's Curaytor.com to learn more about my company, which is the one I'm running during these calls. We help small businesses grow faster, and we've been featured recently by Inc., Forbes, Fortune, and Entrepreneur Magazine.